Emily stepped off the bus with a heavy backpack slung over her shoulder, her heart pounding in her chest. Boot camp had always seemed like a distant nightmare she'd heard stories about. Long hours of training, harsh instructors, and recruits who were ready to mock anyone who seemed weak. As she looked around, the military base stretched out in front of her. Endless rows of barracks and training grounds, the morning sun glinting off the polished metal of the obstacle courses. Everything about it felt intimidating, and yet, she knew this was a challenge she had to face. Her uniform felt tight and stiff, slightly uncomfortable against her skin, but it was a symbol of the commitment she had made. Emily adjusted her collar and straightened her posture, trying to appear confident, even though inside, nerves twisted her stomach. The other recruits were already gathering, chatting loudly, some giving each other encouraging pats on the back, while others threw playful jabs that made Emily cringe. She knew she didn't fit the typical mold. Unlike some of the others who were athletic and loud, she had always been more quiet, more thoughtful, and she carried herself in a way that drew attention, but not always in a positive way. As she took a cautious step forward, she felt the weight of their eyes. Then, almost instinctively, she noticed that a few of the recruits were staring at the top of her back, where the collar of her uniform didn't fully cover a tattoo. A phoenix, bold and detailed, spread its wings across her shoulder blades, its feathers curling and twisting in intricate patterns. She had gotten it to remind herself of what she had overcome, a personal symbol of rebirth and resilience after a difficult period in her life. To her, it represented strength, courage, and rising above challenges. To these strangers, however, it immediately became something to judge, something to whisper about. Whispers began, quiet at first, but growing louder as more recruits noticed. "Look at that," someone said, barely suppressing a laugh. Another added, "Do you think she actually thinks she can survive here with that thing on her back?" Emily kept walking, pretending not to hear, though every word pricked at her pride. She had been teased before in life, but this was different. These were strangers, future colleagues, people who would see her every day for the next weeks, and they were already judging her before she even got a chance to show her capabilities. She tried to focus on her breathing, counting steps as she approached the assembly area. The drill sergeant hadn't appeared yet, and there was a tense silence as everyone waited, some shifting uncomfortably on their feet, others trying to act relaxed. Emily felt small in that moment, dwarfed by the size of the other recruits and the enormity of the training ahead. Her heart raced, but she refused to let it show. She reminded herself that this was just the beginning, that the first impression didn't define her, and that she had faced challenges before in life that seemed impossible until she conquered them. As the morning wore on, she observed the other recruits more closely. Some were joking with each other, flexing their muscles, comparing their strengths, while others quietly strategized, planning how to survive the grueling exercises they knew were coming. Emily realized that while the tattoo had drawn attention, it also made her feel exposed, like everyone could see right through her. She wondered briefly if she should have covered it more carefully, hidden that symbol of her strength that now felt like a target. But then, she straightened her back and reminded herself why she had it. To be a reminder of her own power, not to appease others. The mockery didn't stop. A few recruits made louder comments, some pointing in her direction while laughing under their breath. "Phoenix girl, more like firecracker," someone muttered, trying to be clever. Another added, "Bet she won't last a day here." Emily forced herself not to respond, keeping her face neutral, though her fingers twitched with the urge to defend herself. She knew reacting would only give them more satisfaction. Instead, she decided she would show them not with words, but with her actions. Every push-up, every sprint, every obstacle she completed would speak louder than any insult. Despite the whispers and stares, Emily also noticed something curious. A few of the recruits were silent, watching her with curiosity rather than ridicule. Perhaps they were impressed, perhaps they were evaluating her, or maybe they simply recognized that she wasn't going to be an easy target. This small observation gave her a sliver of hope. She wasn't invisible. She had an impact, and maybe, just maybe, it would be the kind of impact that earned respect rather than scorn. By the time the drill sergeant finally appeared, The tension in the air became palpable. Emily felt her stomach twist with a mix of fear and anticipation. She didn't know what the next few weeks would bring, physically, mentally, or emotionally, but she knew one thing clearly. She wasn't going to let the ridicule define her. That tattoo, the phoenix rising across her back, wasn't just ink on skin. It was a promise to herself that no matter what happened in boot camp, she would rise, stronger and more determined than ever. And with that thought, Emily squared her shoulders, took a deep breath, and stepped fully into the world of boot camp, ready to face whatever came her way. The first full day at boot camp started earlier than Emily had ever imagined. The sun was barely rising, but the sound of whistles, shouts, and the pounding of boots on the concrete filled the air. Emily's body ached even before the real training began. She could feel her muscles tightening, and the sleep from the night before seemed like it had never existed. Everything about boot camp was designed to push her to her limits, and she knew it. But she also knew that this was exactly why she had come, to test herself to see what she was truly capable of. The recruits were lined up in formation, standing rigidly in the cool morning air. Emily tried to keep her balance and posture perfect, all the while aware of the eyes of her fellow trainees. She could still feel the whispers from yesterday following her, those snide comments about her tattoo and her appearance. Some recruits openly laughed as she struggled to keep her arms straight during warm-up exercises, while others just shot her looks that seemed to say, "You don't belong here." Emily felt a flicker of embarrassment, but she swallowed it down and focused on what she could control, her own effort. Then came the first real physical challenge, the obstacle course. It was enormous, stretching across the training field like a mechanical jungle. There were climbing walls, rope swings, balance beams, and walls to crawl under. Emily watched as other recruits tackled the obstacles with ease, some running ahead, some helping each other along the way. Her heart pounded as she approached the first wall, the rough wood splintering slightly under her fingers. She hesitated for just a second, noticing the smirks of the recruits waiting behind her. They whispered, "Bet she'll fall." And she felt the sting of their doubt. But she remembered why she was here. The phoenix tattoo on her back wasn't just for show. It was a symbol of rising above every challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. Emily took a deep breath and planted her hands on the wall, pulling herself up with all her strength. Her arms burned, and her palms slipped against the rough wood, but she refused to let herself fall. Inch by inch, she climbed, her legs trembling under the strain. At the top, she paused, looking down at the ground far below. A wave of fear surged, but she pushed it aside, remembering the countless times in her life she had overcome fear before. With one final push, she swung her legs over the edge and dropped down safely on the other side. Some of the recruits clapped quietly, but others laughed, muttering about how slow she had been. Emily didn't react. She kept moving one obstacle after another, focusing entirely on the task at hand. The rope swing came next, and she hesitated again. The rope was thick and worn, swinging over a deep pit filled with sand. One wrong move and she could fall hard. She gripped it tightly, swung her legs, and leaped forward, landing on the platform with a thud. Her heart raced, and sweat poured down her face, but she had done it. Another small victory, a reminder to herself that she was stronger than anyone else's judgment. Even as she progressed, Emily noticed that her tattoo was still drawing attention. Every time she climbed or stretched, the phoenix on her back became visible, and she could see some of the recruits glancing at it. This time, though, the reactions were different. Some faces showed surprise, even a hint of respect, though others continued to whisper cruel jokes. Emily realized something important. Her tattoo didn't define her weakness or strength. It simply made her presence impossible to ignore. She could let it be a target, or she could let it be a symbol of her determination. She chose the latter. By the time the morning exercises ended, Emily's body was exhausted, trembling with fatigue from the hours of physical and mental stress. She barely had time to catch her breath before the next set of instructions began. The drill sergeant, a tall, imposing figure with a sharp gaze that seemed to pierce right through her, started walking down the line, inspecting each recruit. Emily held her head high, her chest out, refusing to shrink under his stare. He paused briefly at her, eyes flicking to the tattoo on her back, then back to her face. He didn't say anything, but she felt a strange mix of tension and curiosity emanating from him. For the first time, she felt that her effort might be noticed, not just mocked. During breaks, Emily tried to eat and rest, but the other recruits weren't finished testing her. Some continued to whisper about her tattoo, while others outright laughed at the way she had struggled with certain obstacles. They didn't realize that their words, rather than breaking her, were fueling her determination. She reminded herself of all the times she had been underestimated in life, of all the moments people told her she couldn't do something. Those moments had always pushed her to work harder, and she knew this would be no different. She had a fire inside her that no comment, no laugh, no sneer could put out. As the day ended, Emily felt a quiet sense of pride despite the ridicule. She hadn't been the fastest or the strongest, but she had made it through the exercises, completed every obstacle, and stayed true to herself. The whispers of the other recruits had begun to fade into the background, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat and her own determination. She realized that boot camp wasn't just about physical strength. It was about mental endurance, courage, and the refusal to be broken by anyone else's opinion. That night, lying in the barracks on a narrow cot, Emily stared at the ceiling and let herself relax for the first time all day. Her body ached, her muscles screamed, but her spirit felt stronger. The whispers, the mocking, the judgment, they hadn't defeated her. Instead, they had reminded her why she was here and what she was capable of. The phoenix on her back wasn't just a tattoo. It was a promise she made to herself, that no matter what, she would rise, she would endure, and she would prove her worth. As she drifted into a restless sleep, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. The days ahead would be harder, the challenges greater, and the ridicule might intensify. But she was ready. The first day had shown her that she had something others underestimated, an unbreakable will and the courage to face whatever came next. And with that, Emily was prepared to face boot camp, one grueling day at a time. By the third day of boot camp, the teasing had grown louder and more relentless. Emily had hoped that maybe, just maybe, the initial whispers and snickers would fade as everyone got used to her presence. But instead, the other recruits seemed determined to make her feel out of place. Nicknames had started to stick. Some called her Phoenix Girl. Others whispered, Tattoo Freak, whenever she passed. Even when she tried to ignore them, their words clung to her like a shadow, following her from the barracks to the training field. Every glance, every snicker, reminded her that she was being judged before she had even proven herself. The mornings were the hardest. Physical training seemed designed to expose every weakness. Emily noticed how effortlessly some recruits climbed walls or ran laps around the field while she struggled to keep pace. Each step felt heavy, every breath a challenge. Her muscles ached from yesterday's exercises, but she refused to give up. Still, the other recruits didn't let her forget her struggles. They would exchange glances and laugh quietly when she stumbled during a sprint or struggled with a rope climb. It was subtle at first, but their ridicule grew bolder, more direct. "Come on, Phoenix. You're going to melt before we even start," one of them shouted during a drill. Emily forced herself to keep her face neutral, her jaw tight. She refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. The drill sergeant observed quietly from a distance. He said little, but Emily could feel his eyes scanning the recruits, judging, assessing. Unlike the others, he wasn't laughing or mocking. He was watching to see who could endure, who could push through the discomfort, and who would crumble. Emily knew that he would notice her struggles as well as her persistence, even if the other recruits didn't. That thought gave her a tiny spark of encouragement. If anyone could see her true potential, it would be him, not the ones laughing behind her back. During one particularly grueling obstacle exercise, the recruits were tasked with crawling under a low net while carrying heavy sandbags. Emily's arms burned, and her back screamed with exertion. The weight of the bag dug into her shoulders, and the rough ground scraped against her skin. She could hear the whispers again. "She's going to get stuck. Phoenix can't even crawl. Emily's stomach twisted, but she ignored them. Instead, she focused on the rhythm of her movements. Down, forward, up, repeat. Inch by inch, she made progress, refusing to let the mockery stop her. Every time her arms trembled, she reminded herself of the phoenix, the symbol of strength, rebirth, and resilience on her back. She imagined rising from the ashes of every failure, stronger each time. By midday, the teasing had moved into more personal territory. Some recruits whispered about her life, speculating about why she had chosen to get a tattoo so large and visible. "Who even gets something like that?" one of them muttered. "It's not like she can hide it here, and now everyone can see she's different." The words stung, but Emily refused to retreat. In her mind, she replayed her reasons for the tattoo, the hardships she had overcome, and the personal battles she had won. It was her story, her strength, and no one else's opinion could change that. During lunch, Emily sat quietly, choosing a spot at the edge of the table. She didn't engage in the gossip or the jokes, and for some of the recruits that only made her a bigger target. Whispers followed her as she ate, small but cutting. "She thinks she's better than us," someone said. "Bet she can't even keep up in the long run." Emily simply chewed slowly, pretending not to hear, all the while planning how she would prove them wrong. Not with words, but with action. Every challenge was an opportunity to rise above, and she knew that eventually, her perseverance would speak louder than the ridicule. The afternoon brought more physical challenges, this time involving teamwork. The recruits were grouped into teams and tasked with navigating an obstacle course while carrying injured soldiers on stretchers. Emily's team was skeptical of her at first. They whispered and shot her doubtful looks, expecting her to falter. But Emily stayed calm. When the first stretch of the course approached, she lifted the stretcher with steady hands, careful not to drop it, and coordinated with her teammates. Despite their initial skepticism, she executed her part flawlessly. A few of the recruits couldn't help but glance at her in surprise, their expressions shifting from ridicule to cautious respect. By the end of the day, Emily's body was sore, every muscle screaming in protest. But something inside her had grown stronger. The mockery, instead of breaking her, had fueled her determination. She realized that being laughed at or whispered about didn't make her weak. It made her resilient. She had learned to focus on her own effort, her own strength, and her own mind. The laughter of others no longer dictated her sense of self. That night, as Emily lay on her cot in the barracks, she reflected on the day. She could still hear the voices in her head, repeating the words of the recruits, but they felt smaller now, distant, powerless. What mattered was what she had accomplished, how she had endured, and the fact that she had refused to give up even when others wanted her to fail. She touched the phoenix tattoo on her back lightly, tracing the outline with her fingers, and smiled. It was more than just ink. It was a reminder that she could rise above anything. Emily knew the days ahead would only grow tougher. The teasing would continue, and the physical challenges would become more demanding. But she had discovered a truth that would carry her through. Ridicule could never defeat her. Only she could define her limits, and she had already proven that she refused to be defined by anyone else's opinion. With that thought, she closed her eyes, letting herself rest for the first time all day, ready to face whatever came next with the same determination and courage that had carried her through the trials so far. The fourth day at boot camp started with a bitter chill in the morning air, but the recruits barely noticed. They were already moving in formation, boots pounding the ground, every step synchronized by the drill sergeant's sharp whistle. Emily felt the familiar ache in her legs and shoulders from the past day's training, but she refused to let it slow her down. Boot camp was becoming less of a nightmare and more of a proving ground, a place to test not just her body, but her determination, her focus, and her resilience. The morning run was longer than any she had experienced before. Emily could feel her lungs burning, her heart hammering in her chest, but she kept pace, step after step. Around her, recruits stumbled or fell behind, some grunting in frustration, others muttering under their breath about who would survive and who would crack first. Emily felt the familiar sting of judgment from her peers. Phoenix is falling behind. She heard someone whisper, and another snickered. She'll be last, watch. But Emily ignored them, concentrating on her rhythm, matching her breathing to her steps, and letting nothing distract her. As they rounded the bend near the obstacle course, Emily felt a pair of eyes on her. The drill sergeant had stopped for a moment, observing the group, and his gaze rested on her. Unlike the other recruits, his eyes were not filled with mockery or expectation. They were sharp, calculating, and curious. Emily could feel his scrutiny like a weight on her back, and for the first time it made her nervous in a different way. It wasn't fear of punishment. It was a challenge to prove herself under his watchful eyes. During the run, Emily stumbled slightly on uneven terrain, her ankle twisting, and she felt a sharp pang of panic. Usually, such a stumble would have drawn laughter from her peers, but she didn't hear anything, at least not audibly. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and pushed forward, refusing to let the moment slow her. The drill sergeant's eyes stayed on her for the remainder of the run, and she could sense his attention was different. He wasn't watching to see her fail. He was watching to see how she handled it. After the run, the recruits moved to the obstacle course, a series of walls, ropes, and balance beams designed to push their physical limits. Emily's back tensed as she approached the first wall. With every climb, her phoenix tattoo became visible, catching the early morning sun. She noticed a flicker of recognition in the drill sergeant's eyes as he paused to watch her tackle the challenges. He didn't say a word, but the silence carried weight. Emily felt a mix of apprehension and pride, realizing that she was being seen, not just for her struggles, but for her effort and determination. The next challenge was the rope climb. Emily gripped the thick rope tightly, her fingers already blistered from previous exercises. Her arms shook under the strain, and her legs trembled as she pushed herself upward. The whispers of the other recruits were distant now, replaced by the sound of her own breathing and the faint encouragement she imagined from herself. Inch by inch, she climbed, and when she reached the top, she took a moment to steady herself before dropping to the platform below. She had made it, despite the odds and despite the doubts cast by others. Throughout the morning, Emily noticed something she hadn't before. Subtle changes in the behavior of her peers. Some still whispered and snickered, but others seemed to hesitate, as if they were beginning to respect her endurance and determination. Even a few who had been the loudest in mocking her were now watching her more closely, unsure of what to think. Emily realized that actions spoke louder than words, and that every obstacle she overcame was gradually shifting the perception of those around her. During the brief break after the obstacle course, Emily leaned against a tree, catching her breath. Sweat poured down her face, and her muscles throbbed in protest, but she felt a strange sense of accomplishment. She had completed everything the drill sergeant had demanded, and she had done it on her own terms. The phoenix tattoo on her back seemed almost alive in the morning light, a reflection of her inner strength and resilience. For the first time, she felt that the symbol she had once feared might make her a target was actually working in her favor. It was a visual representation of her determination, impossible to ignore. The drill sergeant walked past the recruits during the break, stopping briefly at each one. When he reached Emily, he paused just long enough to study her stance, her breathing, and the subtle movements that revealed her fatigue but also her resolve. He didn't speak, but Emily felt a shift in the air. A quiet acknowledgement that he had noticed her not just as another recruit, but as someone who refused to give up, someone who had an inner fire that couldn't be extinguished by fatigue or ridicule. As the morning exercises ended, Emily's confidence grew. She realized that boot camp was not just about physical endurance. It was about mental strength, the ability to stay focused under pressure, and the courage to keep going when others doubted her. The drill sergeant's silent observation had given her a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just trying to survive the ridicule of her peers. She was beginning to prove to herself that she was capable of much more than anyone else expected. By the time the recruits returned to the barracks, Emily was exhausted, every muscle in her body aching. But there was a spark inside her, a growing fire of determination that refused to be dimmed. The drill sergeant's silence had spoken volumes, and she knew that she was being tested in more ways than one. It wasn't just about strength or speed. It was about character, resilience, and the ability to rise above the challenges and judgments that life placed in her path. That night, as Emily lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, she traced her fingers over the phoenix tattoo on her back. It felt like more than just ink now. It was a symbol of her journey, her courage, and her unbreakable spirit. The ridicule of the past few days had not defeated her. It had fueled her, sharpened her focus, and strengthened her resolve. She closed her eyes, ready to face the coming days with the same determination and courage, knowing that the drill sergeant had noticed her, and that perhaps, for the first time, she was starting to earn the respect she had always deserved. The morning of the 5th day brought an unexpected challenge. Emily and the other recruits were told they would be participating in a simulated combat exercise, a test of endurance, teamwork, and mental sharpness. Everyone knew this exercise would push them to their limits, and Emily felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. This was her chance, not just to survive the ridicule of her peers, but to prove that she could handle far more than anyone expected. The recruits were divided into teams and given the mission: navigate through a challenging terrain filled with obstacles, complete a series of tasks, and extract injured teammates along the way. Emily's team looked doubtful when they saw her step forward. Some members whispered under their breath, "She's going to slow us down?" Or, "Do you really think she can keep up?" Emily ignored them, focusing entirely on what she could control: her own effort, determination, and focus. The terrain was treacherous. Muddy slopes, low-hanging branches, and uneven paths made every step an effort. Emily's legs burned from the strain, and her arms ached from pulling herself over fallen logs. At first, she struggled to keep up with the others, who moved faster, their bodies more accustomed to the harsh demands of boot camp. She could hear whispers again, snide remarks about her slow pace, and her tattoo peeking from her uniform as she climbed. Normally, this would have shaken her confidence, but Emily had learned to use that energy differently. She reminded herself of all the challenges she had already overcome, all the times she had been underestimated in life, and she channeled that into a quiet determination to succeed. Then came the first critical moment. A teammate injured during the simulation needed to be carried across a rough patch filled with jagged rocks and steep slopes. Emily noticed that others hesitated, unsure if they could manage the weight safely. Without thinking, she stepped forward and offered to help. Lifting the teammate with a firm grip, she balanced the weight carefully and navigated the terrain with surprising agility. Her team watched in silence, some mouths slightly open in disbelief. The same recruits who had mocked her earlier were now forced to reevaluate their assumptions. Emily's actions were speaking louder than any words of ridicule could. As the exercise continued, more challenges arose. The team had to cross a rope bridge suspended over a shallow ravine. Emily's heart pounded, and her legs shook as she stepped onto the swinging planks. The wind tugged at the ropes, making it unstable, but she kept her focus. Each careful step required balance, precision, and courage. The phoenix tattoo on her back became visible with every stretch and movement, its symbolism quietly echoing her actions. Rising above difficulty, facing danger, and moving forward despite fear. During a particularly tricky section of the terrain, the team needed to work together to pull a heavy log into place to create a makeshift bridge. Emily grabbed one end with the others and pushed with all her strength. Her arms burned, her legs quivered, and sweat ran down her face, but she refused to give up. The teamwork began to click, and the same teammates who had once doubted her now recognized her commitment and determination. Her resilience became contagious, inspiring others to push harder and coordinate better. By the time they reached the final stage of the exercise, Emily had completely transformed in the eyes of her peers. The whispers of mockery had faded, replaced by surprise and cautious respect. Even the loudest critics couldn't deny that she had contributed more than anyone expected. She had proven that she was not only capable of handling the physical demands of boot camp, but also that she had the mental toughness to overcome fear, fatigue, and judgment. The drill sergeant had been observing the team closely throughout the exercise. Emily noticed his sharp eyes on her during critical moments, watching not just her movements but her attitude, her courage, and the way she handled setbacks. When she lifted the injured teammate across the jagged terrain, or stepped onto the swaying rope bridge with steady determination, she could feel his gaze acknowledging her effort. He didn't say a word, but Emily understood that his silence carried respect, a recognition that she was rising above the expectations of both her peers and herself. By the end of the exercise, the team had completed every task successfully. Emily's body ached from the exertion, her muscles trembling with fatigue, but her spirit soared. She had faced challenges that she once thought would be impossible, and she had not only survived but thrived. The ridicule she had endured in previous days felt distant now, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of achievement. She realized that strength was not just measured in speed or brute force. It was measured in courage, persistence, and the ability to keep moving forward when others doubted you. That evening, back at the barracks, Emily sat quietly while her teammates ate and shared stories of the day. Some of the same recruits who had mocked her approached, their expressions cautious, almost apologetic. "I didn't think you could do it," one of them admitted. "You were amazing out there." Emily smiled softly, nodding, but said nothing. Actions, she had learned, spoke louder than words. She had proven herself not for recognition, but to herself, that she could endure, adapt, and rise above every challenge placed in front of her. As she lay on her cot that night, tracing the outline of the phoenix tattoo on her back, Emily reflected on the day. It was no longer just a symbol. It had become a part of her journey, a reflection of her courage and determination. The exercise had been a test of endurance, but it had also been a test of character. And Emily had passed, not just by completing the physical challenges, but by refusing to let fear, judgment, or ridicule dictate her actions. She knew that the days ahead would bring even harder trials, but she felt ready. For the first time, she believed in herself as much as she wanted others to believe in her. The phoenix on her back was no longer just ink. It was a symbol of her strength, her ability to rise above adversity, and the fire that would carry her through the rest of boot camp. And with that thought, Emily closed her eyes, exhausted but proud, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and determination. The sun rose high on the 6th day of boot camp, casting golden light over the training grounds. The heat was already beginning to weigh on the recruits as they lined up for another grueling day of exercises. Emily felt the familiar ache in her muscles from the past days, but it no longer felt entirely negative. She had begun to recognize her own strength and resilience, the things that had allowed her to endure when others had doubted her. Today, however, something unexpected was about to happen. Something that would change the way her peers and even the drill sergeant saw her. The morning began with standard physical drills. Push-ups, sit-ups, and sprints across the field. Emily pushed herself harder than ever, refusing to let fatigue show. Every time she lowered herself for a push-up, she could feel her phoenix tattoo stretch beneath her uniform. Normally hidden beneath the collar and straps of her gear, today the instructors had ordered them to remove their jackets and roll up their sleeves for ventilation. Emily's heart raced as she realized that her back would now be visible in full to the drill sergeant and all the recruits. For the first time, her personal symbol, a phoenix rising from ashes, would be seen in its entirety. As she finished her warm-up, she felt the familiar whispers start up again. Some recruits snickered, clearly trying to make her feel self-conscious. But their words seemed smaller today, less significant. Emily had spent the past few days proving her strength and determination, and now she understood something important. The tattoo was no longer just ink on her skin. It was a statement of who she was, a reflection of her inner fire and resilience. She straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and prepared to face whatever reaction came next. When she removed her jacket fully for the exercises, the phoenix was revealed in all its glory. The other recruits froze for a moment, their mouths slightly open, eyes wide in astonishment. The intricate design stretched across her shoulder blades, its wings extending gracefully, its flames curling in detailed patterns. For a brief, silent moment, even the most mocking voices were gone. The sight of it was impossible to ignore. It demanded attention, respect, and admiration. Emily felt a strange thrill, not from pride, but from the recognition that her story, her struggles, and her strength were finally visible in a way that could not be dismissed. The drill sergeant's reaction was immediate. He stopped his usual pacing, his eyes widening just slightly as they took in the tattoo. He went completely silent, his expression unreadable, as if he were carefully measuring every detail of the design and the determination etched into Emily's posture and movements. The silence was powerful, commanding the attention of the entire group. For the first time, Emily felt that the instructor's respect might be genuine, not just a fleeting acknowledgement. She realized that the tattoo, combined with the perseverance she had displayed over the past days, had created an undeniable impression. Even her peers were affected. The ones who had mocked her earlier now hesitated, their laughter replaced by awe and surprise. Some exchanged nervous glances, unsure how to respond. The recruits who had whispered insults now looked at her differently, realizing that their judgments had been shallow and premature. Emily noticed the subtle shift in their behavior, the way they began to treat her with a mixture of curiosity and respect. For the first time in boot camp, she felt that she belonged, not because she had changed who she was, but because she had remained true to herself and demonstrated real strength. The morning's exercises continued, but the energy among the recruits had changed. Emily performed every drill with renewed confidence, moving efficiently and with focus. Whenever she climbed a wall, lifted a heavy weight, or navigated a challenging obstacle, the phoenix tattoo seemed to come alive beneath her skin. It was as if every effort she made was reflected in the image of the rising bird, symbolizing her endurance and ability to overcome adversity. The drill sergeant watched closely, occasionally nodding subtly, his eyes tracking her progress, assessing her skill, strength, and character. During one particularly challenging obstacle, the recruits were tasked with carrying a heavy log up a steep incline. Emily and her team coordinated their movements carefully, lifting and pushing together. As they moved, her back arched and stretched, revealing the phoenix more prominently. Her teammates who had once doubted her now followed her lead, inspired by her quiet determination and steady presence. Emily felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not from proving them wrong, but from realizing that her perseverance had influenced others and shifted the dynamics of the group. By the time the morning drills ended, Emily's physical exhaustion was profound, but it was accompanied by a growing sense of accomplishment. The phoenix tattoo, once a source of ridicule and judgment, had transformed into a symbol of her courage and determination. The drill sergeant, who had watched silently throughout, finally spoke, his voice carrying authority and weight. "Emily," he said, "you've shown resilience and strength that not many possess. Keep this up, and you'll inspire those around you." His words, simple as they were, felt monumental. Emily knew that her efforts had been recognized in a way that would leave a lasting impression, not just on her, but on everyone at boot camp. That night, as Emily lay on her cot, she traced her fingers over the phoenix tattoo again, reflecting on the day. The ridicule of the past seemed distant now. Instead of being a mark of mockery, it had become a symbol of triumph, proof that she could endure, inspire, and rise above every challenge. She realized that the tattoo was more than a design. It was a story of her journey, her resilience, and her determination to persevere no matter what others thought. Emily knew that the days ahead would bring even greater challenges, both physical and mental, but she felt prepared. The revelation of the tattoo, combined with the respect she had earned through her actions, had changed everything. She had proven to herself that her strength was real, and that the opinions of others could not define her. With the rising sun casting shadows across the barracks, Emily closed her eyes, confident that she could face whatever boot camp and life threw at her next. By the 7th day of boot camp, Emily could feel a subtle shift in the energy around her. The whispers, the mocking, the sideways glances, they had all started to fade. Her peers, who had once been quick to ridicule her, were now observing her differently. Some were still cautious, unsure of what to make of her, but many had begun to show a quiet respect for her determination and strength. Emily noticed it in the way they listened to her during team exercises, in the small nods when she took the lead, and in the absence of those cruel, mocking remarks that had once followed her everywhere. It was as if her consistent effort, perseverance, and courage had begun to reshape the way they saw her. The morning began with another series of grueling physical exercises, but this time, Emily approached them with a renewed sense of confidence. She had learned over the past week that bootcamp was as much about mental endurance as it was about physical strength. Every obstacle she faced was an opportunity to prove to herself, not anyone else, what she was capable of. The drill sergeant watched closely, as always, but Emily felt less nervous now. His gaze no longer carried the weight of judgment but seemed to carry quiet acknowledgement of her persistence. She knew that he had noticed the changes in her, the way she had taken every challenge seriously and refused to let ridicule or doubt define her actions. During a team exercise, the recruits were tasked with a complex maneuver that required cooperation, focus, and strategy. Emily stepped forward confidently, offering guidance and coordinating movements, her voice calm but firm. Her teammates, who had once doubted her abilities, followed her lead without hesitation. For the first time, Emily could feel the difference her effort had made. Her leadership was no longer questioned. It was accepted. The same recruits who had whispered jokes about her tattoo and mocked her stumbles were now quietly supporting her, even taking her advice during the exercise. It was a subtle but powerful transformation. At one point during the exercise, a teammate stumbled, dropping a piece of crucial equipment. Without hesitation, Emily moved forward to help, steadying the equipment and encouraging her teammate. The drill sergeant, who had been observing the group silently, gave a small nod of approval. He didn't speak, but his recognition was unmistakable. Emily realized that her actions, her determination, her resilience, and her willingness to step up when others faltered, were earning her respect not just from her peers but also from the person whose opinion mattered most in bootcamp. By midday, the dynamics of the group had shifted significantly. Emily noticed that some recruits were approaching her with questions, seeking advice, or asking for help with exercises. The same people who had laughed at her struggles and mocked her tattoo were now showing signs of admiration, if not outright respect. Emily didn't let it make her arrogant. Instead, she focused on being helpful and encouraging, showing the same patience and determination that had carried her through the early days of ridicule. The phoenix tattoo on her back had become a symbol of something more than personal strength. It had become a quiet reminder to everyone around her that perseverance and courage could inspire change. During the afternoon drills, the drill sergeant called the recruits for a team exercise that required precise coordination and trust. Emily took the lead naturally, guiding her teammates through the challenge with calm authority. She could feel their confidence in her growing, and their cooperation made the task smoother than she could have hoped. It was a moment of quiet triumph, not because she had outshone anyone physically, but because she had earned the respect and trust of her peers through consistent effort, resilience, and integrity. Even the drill sergeant seemed visibly impressed, his sharp eyes following her movements and nodding in acknowledgement at her steady composure. Later, as the day drew to a close, the drill sergeant pulled Emily aside quietly. His voice was firm but carried a hint of approval. "You've shown resilience, leadership, and strength that many of your peers lack," he said. "Keep this up, and you'll not only succeed here but inspire those around you." Emily felt a warmth spread through her chest, not from flattery, but from the validation that came from hard work, determination, and staying true to herself. She realized that the ridicule she had endured earlier had not broken her. It had prepared her for this moment, shaping her into someone capable of guiding, supporting, and inspiring others. That evening, Emily returned to the barracks with a sense of quiet satisfaction. Her teammates greeted her differently now, some offering smiles, others simply acknowledging her presence without the whispers or snickers that had dominated the first week. She felt a sense of belonging for the first time in bootcamp. The phoenix tattoo on her back, once mocked and ridiculed, had become a symbol not just of her personal resilience, but also of the influence she could have on others. It was a reminder that courage and determination were contagious, capable of inspiring change in even the most doubtful hearts. As Emily lay on her cot that night, she reflected on her journey so far. She thought about the days filled with whispers, laughter, and judgment, and she realized how far she had come. The boot camp that had once felt like a place of humiliation had transformed into a proving ground for her character, strength, and leadership. She traced the outline of her phoenix tattoo, feeling its presence as a source of power and inspiration. She knew that the days ahead would bring even greater challenges, but she felt ready. Her journey had taught her that true strength wasn't measured by speed, size, or the absence of struggle. It was measured by perseverance, courage, and the ability to rise above doubt, ridicule, and fear. Emily closed her eyes, letting herself rest for the first time that day with a profound sense of accomplishment. She had begun to earn genuine respect, not because she demanded it, but because she had proven, through her actions, that she was strong, determined, and capable. The phoenix on her back had become more than just a symbol of personal struggle. It was now a symbol of inspiration, resilience, and triumph. Emily knew that she was ready to face whatever came next in boot camp, and in life, with courage, determination, and the quiet confidence of someone who had truly risen above. The final day of boot camp had arrived, and the energy on the training grounds was electric. Emily could feel it in the air, the mixture of exhaustion, anticipation, and accomplishment that filled every recruit as they prepared for the last challenge. She stood in formation, her body sore from days of relentless training, but her spirit stronger than it had ever been. The journey had been grueling, filled with ridicule, doubt, and physical strain, but she had survived. More than that, she had grown, proving to herself and everyone around her that determination, courage, and resilience could overcome any obstacle. The drill sergeant stepped forward, his sharp eyes scanning the recruits, then landing on Emily. For the first time, the stern authority figure was silent for a long moment, simply observing her. Emily felt a flicker of nervousness, but it was different from the fear she had felt on her first day. This time, it was a mixture of anticipation and pride. She had earned the recognition that her efforts deserved. Her phoenix tattoo, partially visible as the morning sun caught the edge of her uniform, seemed to glow as if echoing her journey. It was a symbol not just of her struggle but of her rise from it, a reflection of the strength she had built within herself. The day's challenge was the final obstacle course, a combination of every drill, exercise, and test the recruits had faced over the past week. It was designed to push them to their limits and show who had the physical endurance, mental toughness, and determination to succeed. Emily approached the first obstacle, her focus laser sharp. Every moment of boot camp, every hardship, every mocking word had prepared her for this. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and leapt forward. As she climbed, crawled, and sprinted through the obstacles, Emily felt the rhythm she had built over the past week. She moved with purpose, her body responding to each challenge with precision. The other recruits watched, some impressed, some in quiet awe, as she tackled each obstacle with determination and efficiency. The whispers of ridicule that had followed her at the start of boot camp were gone, replaced by respect and curiosity. Emily realized that her perseverance had quietly spoken for her, louder than any words could have. During the middle of the course, a particularly difficult section required lifting and moving heavy equipment while maintaining balance on a narrow beam. Emily's arms shook, her muscles burned, and sweat poured down her face. For a moment, she considered slowing down, letting fatigue take over, but she remembered every step she had taken to reach this point. The days of ridicule, the long runs, the obstacles she had conquered, and the moments when she had refused to let anyone's opinion dictate her strength. She pushed forward, lifting the weight with steady hands, keeping her focus on the task. When she reached the next stage, a rope climb over a deep pit, Emily's back arched, revealing the phoenix in its full glory. This time, there was no mocking laughter. The drill sergeant, standing at the edge, froze for a moment, eyes wide as he took in the tattoo and the determination in her movements. Even the other recruits, who had once doubted her abilities, now stared with admiration. The phoenix, the symbol of her strength, courage, and rebirth, had become a visual representation of everything she had achieved. The final stretch of the course required teamwork. Emily's team needed to carry a heavy stretcher with an injured recruit through a rough, uneven terrain. Her teammates looked to her instinctively, and she guided them with calm authority. Every movement was precise, coordinated, and strong. The energy of the team shifted. The respect and trust they now had for her allowed them to function seamlessly. Emily realized that she had transformed from the target of mockery into a leader, someone capable of inspiring those around her simply by showing courage, determination, and resilience. When she finally crossed the finish line, Emily collapsed to the ground, exhaustion overwhelming her body, but a triumphant smile spread across her face. The drill sergeant walked over. His usually stern expression softened with a subtle nod of approval. "Well done, Emily," he said. "You've shown strength, perseverance, and courage that few possess. You've earned your place here, and you've inspired those around you." His words carried weight, a recognition of not just physical accomplishment, but the growth, leadership, and inner strength she had demonstrated. Her peers gathered around, clapping and cheering. Some of the recruits who had once mocked her came forward, their expressions full of genuine respect. "You were amazing out there," one said. Another admitted quietly, "I underestimated you. You're incredible." Emily felt a warmth in her chest, not from praise alone, but from knowing that her journey, from ridicule and doubt to triumph and respect, was complete. She had stayed true to herself, remained resilient, and risen above every challenge. Later, as the recruits gathered for the final ceremony, Emily stood tall, her phoenix tattoo visible and radiant under the sunlight. It had become more than just ink. It was a symbol of every struggle she had endured, every fear she had overcome, and every moment she had refused to give up. The drill sergeant addressed the group, acknowledging those who had shown exceptional determination, and when he spoke of Emily, the entire formation turned to look at her. The whispers of judgment that had haunted her on the first day were gone, replaced by admiration, respect, and awe. That night, back in the barracks, Emily reflected on her journey. The first day had been filled with fear and ridicule, her confidence shaken by mocking peers and judgmental glances. Yet through every obstacle, every grueling exercise, and every moment of doubt, she had remained true to herself. Her determination, courage, and resilience had carried her through, and the phoenix tattoo, once a source of ridicule, had become a symbol of triumph and transformation. Emily realized that her journey at boot camp mirrored life itself. Challenges would always come, people might doubt you, and the road could be painful, but rising above those struggles was always possible if you believed in yourself. As she lay on her cot that night, Emily traced the phoenix on her back with her fingers and smiled. The journey had been hard, but it had made her stronger, braver, and wiser. She had earned the respect of her peers, the acknowledgement of the drill sergeant, and most importantly, the confidence to know her own strength. Emily knew that whatever challenges lay ahead in life, she would face them with the courage of a phoenix rising, stronger and more determined than ever.